So no, I'd like to make some comments.
Yes,
Yeah,
if you
okay.
wanna grab
And
a
then
seat.
you've got Jerry Relph also, was
hi,
at the same
Mr.
event I was
Relph.
at.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good to see you.
Yeah, sorry we're late, we were
That's okay.
tied up at a different.
Yes,
I'll
thank you.
grab another chair.
Oh, you take this one, I think Zach and I can go.
Oh, no, you guys-
Should we stay up here?
Oh, okay.
So, this is my first time that I've had candidates come.
Okay.
How would you guys like us to, would you like us to maybe ask you a few quick questions that Eric and Zach have already responded to?
Whatever you want to
Would
do.
that be okay if we
Sure,
asked you the
sure.
questions that were sent ahead of time?
I'm not sure if I remember the questions sent ahead of
Well,
time, but go ahead.
So why don't we give your representative Knoblach just a chance to introduce yourself and Mr. Relph after that.
Okay, all right, great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Knoblach. I'm the state representative for District 14B. I'm sorry I'm late, but back when this had been announced and people had contacted me, I'd already committed to go to another event that was over at the convention center where I was a sponsor, a table sponsor to. And so I was kind of in a position where, having made that commitment, I really had to go to that event, but I had told Cindy Owen and others that I would try to make it to part of this event as well. And so, sorry to be late, that's why I am here at this time rather than earlier. Just a little background on me. I was born and raised in St. Cloud. I'm married to my wife Janet, who I know some of you know. I have 2 college-age children. When I'm not doing political stuff, which isn't very often these days, it seems like, but I'm a small business owner in the real estate business. I've been involved in I think a lot of efforts with the disability community. In fact, the last time I think I was here, back a few months ago, I was pleased to get an award for bringing additional money to independent lifestyles and other groups like them, because I really do think that they do a great job in helping people who are disabled to live in the community and be able to have a better lifestyle than they'd otherwise have. And so I was pleased to be a part this year as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee down at the Minnesota House in authoring the budget bill that allocated extra money to independent lifestyles for the work that they do. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry Relph.
Well, I'm Jerry Relph. A little bit about me. I'm a 30-year resident or member of the community. I've been around since 1984. I'm a former Marine and Vietnam vet. My background is I was an attorney for about 30 years, 20 of it here in St. Cloud. And then in 1999, my first wife passed away, and a friend of mine called me and said, "You want to do something crazy?" And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, we're going to start a business." So I kind of left the practice of law and went out and started a small business, Lake Master Lake Maps, for those of you who have fished. We made computerized maps of lakes so that people could put them on GPSs. And I kept that business until about 2012 when we sold, and I stayed as a consultant. So then I kind of turned my eyes back towards St. Cloud as some place where I've always put into, and when John Peterson announced that he wasn't going to run, I decided it's time for me to put something back in the community. So that's kind of a little bit of my historical background. I've been involved in the community. I've worked with United Way, their allocations. I've worked with the Anna Marie's Alliance. I was on their board for almost 10 years, worked when they built the shelter. I've been involved in United Arts. So I've always had volunteer opportunities in the community, and I'm very concerned about people with disabilities. I think it's something that we need to continue to support and continue to give opportunities for people with disabilities to be able to lead a good lifestyle within the community, and to integrate them back in, to give them opportunities to be able to be independent to the extent that they can be. So that's kind of my take on that and my background. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Well, I need to also mention Representative Tama Tice was also at the event that we were at, and which was Birthline's annual banquet, and she actually, I guess, was the chair of their board at one time, and because of that, she felt like she needed to stay at that event.
So our first question, and I know this is kind of a strange format being that we already had our other two candidates that are here answer these. So we'll start with you, Representative Knoblach, and then go to Mr. Relph. Our industry is facing a workforce crisis. There are simply not enough people to provide the direct care needed for children and adults with disabilities to lead independent lives. Moreover, high turnover and employee retention struggles have amplified the crisis. ARM's most recent workforce survey showed an overall turnover rate for direct support professionals of 44% and a startling 57% turnover rate for those in their job less than a year. How will you make addressing the workforce crisis in disability services a top priority at the legislature if re-elected or elected?
Well, first of all, let me say, I mean, it is a crisis, and I have talked to many people about this, and I mean, it's a crisis particularly for those who are being cared for, who go through this, rotation of staff who just maybe get to know the person and get to know what their needs are, and are helping them in, sometimes very personal ways, and then all of a sudden they're gone, and now we have a new person, and it's, I know, very, very frustrating for those people who are being cared for. There's probably a variety of different things I could talk about that we could do, but I guess the first and foremost thing I think that we need to do is to adopt the 5% benchmark of raising the reimbursement rate. That's something that I was involved in over the last 2 years. In 2015, when we passed our main budget bill in the House, as Ways and Means Chair, I allocated the money so that we had the 5% increase. Unfortunately, Governor Dayton didn't put any money for that in his budget that year. The Senate Democrat majority did not put any money in their budget for it, and it went to the conference committee to be negotiated. And it is a large amount of money, $90-some million a year, and it didn't make it through the conference committee because the governor and the Senate just were not really committed to it. They had provided some money the previous 2 years, and that's creditable, but they didn't provide any that year. We tried to take a run at it a different way this year. I mean, again, the governor didn't put any money in his supplemental budget in 2016. It didn't make sense, we didn't think, to run the same idea up the flagpole when the governor and the Senate had already rejected it the previous year, so we kind of came up with a different spin on it to provide money to the Best Life campaign, the 5% campaign, based off of some savings that we were, and I still believe are getting from some audits of people that are on the medical assistance Minnesota Care accounts. There are some savings that have been identified there by doing a better job to see, are people still eligible on those programs? If they aren't, or maybe they should be on a different program, have them phased out or phased into a different program. We were proposing that those savings go into the Best Life program. Again, the governor and the Democratic Senate majority didn't like that idea either, and it again didn't survive the conference committee, so unfortunately we were left without anything, but I'm certainly committed to trying to do something with it again this next year, because I do think it's an important need that we need to deal with.
Thank you. Mr. Relph.
Well, I have to ditto everything that Jim says, and of course, coming into this new, don't have the background of what took place in the Senate over the last couple of years, but I am committed to providing sourced funding for this area, for the workers in the area. The other thing I think that is important is that we have a shortage of people to do the jobs. This is something, and this is not only unique to this particular segment of the care industries, but throughout the care industry we have a shortage. There's, I think, last look I saw just in St. Cloud, there's like 2,500 openings for care providers. So part of what I like to look at is a little bit more of a long range idea here. First of all, let's definitely work on the 5%. I mean that seems to be pretty straightforward. But I think we need to look at, first of all, and this plays off into segues into a little different concept, but I think we need to keep working with the education system to try and bring people into the education system at a fairly early age, 6th, 7th, 8th grades, and get them exposed to some of these jobs that are out there and see if they like them. And if they do, then help get curricula that will not only give them good basic education in the what I call the old 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also give them an opportunity to begin to work towards either going through technical education, which my wife teaches in the technical school, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful program. It provides a low-cost way for someone to get trained into a specific area and go right into that and become productive and start earning a good salary. Good salary means we have to get money into your part of the system so that you can pay it. So that goes back to what Jim was talking about. But as a long-range plan, I think this is something we need to look at and keep thinking in that long-range mode. So that's kind of where I am at it, on it.
Thank you. Our second question is similar in theme, and we'll start with you, Mr. Relph. Minnesota, like other states, will be facing additional challenges as the population ages and more people are faced with disabilities. How should Minnesota address the increasing demand for services and the impact the demographic change will have on the state's budget?
Well, I guess I feel that my former answer kind of touched on that. We're going to need more people as the population ages. And one of the things that, especially in the disability area, where I think that the government does have a role as a safety net, it can't be a catch-all, but it's got to provide places for people both that fall through the cracks, which I think is important, but also people that we have identified as vulnerable or needy, and take steps to be able to support them. And as I said, I think that also we need to focus on education. I have a stepson who's in the Peace Corps now, and when he comes back, he wants to go to nursing school. I think that's wonderful. And we need to provide incentives for people who want to do that. And I think there are ways to do that through tax credits for students, help them with their loans if they have them, try to find scholarships or ways to develop scholarships for people who want to go into areas that we do need. When I was in school, I took student loans, and if I decided to enter into certain areas, teaching was one of them at the time, I would be able to retire part of that loan for every year that I taught. I feel that's a good program if it can be identified and carefully managed. So those are just some ideas that I have.
Thank you. Representative Knoblach.
Well, the state spends a great deal of money on people that are in nursing homes, skilled nursing home type situations, and I think that, that is appropriate for some people. I mean, you get to the point with some people and their health issues that is really, all they can do. But we want to keep people out of those kind of situations as long as we can. I think most people would rather be in society, functioning, living in their own home, and so I think that we need to do things like providing funding to help organizations like the one that we're in right now, Independent Lifestyles, which does such a good job with people who are disabled in helping them function in society and helping them live independently. And so, providing, for the state, it's often a huge financial benefit in and of itself, because if we provide a relatively more modest amount of money at an earlier stage, we can prevent people from going into some sort of more skilled nursing facility that costs a lot more. And so whether it's a case like Independent Lifestyles and the work they kind of do, or another example is actually, I was really honored to be in Rochester this last weekend, where the National Federation of the Blind, their Minnesota chapter, had their state convention, and something I was involved in this year was getting an additional $1 million in funding to help people that are getting older who are starting to deal with blindness to be able to deal with it and stay in their own home, as opposed to have to go into some sort of skilled nursing facility. And I was really pleased to be able to do that, have that become law, and I was very proud to be honored with an award at this state convention of the blind. And these are the sort of things that we need to be doing, where we try to keep people independent, try to help them to be able to live the life that most of them really want to live in terms of being on their own and having their own life as opposed to being in some sort of skilled facility. And that's the sort of thing that we need to be looking at trying to do as a state.
Thank you. Our third question, we'll start with Representative Knoblach. To live independently as successfully as possible in the community, children and adults with disabilities have a variety of needs that must be met. For example, housing, transportation, employment, personal supports, and healthcare, to name a few. Pick one of these needs and tell us what you would do to improve the outcomes for people with disabilities in that area.
Well, I pick one. Well, I think I would, let me just, I could talk about several, but let me just talk about transportation, because that's an important area. Transportation in some ways was kind of frustrating down at the Capitol the last 2 years. We did, however, in 2015, pass what was actually the largest transportation bill in state history. And as part of that, we had a significant increase in funding for transit in greater Minnesota, of which our transit commission here in St. Cloud gets something in the neighborhood of about 10% of all the greater Minnesota transit company, our transit funding from the state. And due to that, they've been able to add some additional routes and beef up their system some. And so I think that, providing transit opportunities where, particularly a lot of people that are disabled don't have or for a variety of reasons can't drive a car, that's something that is necessary. This last year, we passed another transportation bill in the House. I'm a believer that we really do need to put some more money into our transportation system, but unfortunately, while we passed it in the House, it did not make it through the Senate, and in the end, there was no bill. I really sort of thought the governor would call us back, because I really didn't think we were all that far apart on it, but only the governor can call us back, and he never did call us back. One other transit thing I would mention that probably a lot of you are aware of is I was really active in the effort this last year to extend the North Star Corridor up to St. Cloud. And, the North Star Corridor has never really fulfilled its original promise. It's never hit the ridership estimates that they originally made for it. I guess I've always felt that St. Cloud being the kind of regional center that it is, it should really be stopping here. Back years ago, it didn't come here because, among other things, there was only one track south of Becker, and it would have cost a lot of money to add the second track, and the federal government basically was not willing to put in the matching money that was needed back then to extend North Star up to St. Cloud. But in the last year, they've added that second track. I've had conversations with the railroad. It seems like there's an interest by them in doing kind of a trade-out where there are 6 trains a day out of Big Lake that go down into the Twin Cities, and basically they're nowhere near capacity, and so by dropping off one of those and then extending a couple of the trains up to St. Cloud to the Amtrak station on the east side that already exists and is actually just in the process of being renovated to be handicapped accessible, we would now be able to have access down to the Twin Cities. So that would make it much easier for people with disabilities that wanted to go down to the Twin Cities for shopping, work, events, whatever, to be able to access it. And unfortunately, while it did make it through a couple of committees, the governor decided he didn't like my particular plan. He didn't have a plan of his own either. I mean, he didn't ever put any money in his budget for it. He never came up with a competing plan, but he kind of decided he didn't like my plan, and so at that point it kind of didn't happen. But I'm still interested in trying to do something in that area, and presuming that people vote for me and I'm reelected, I'll be working on that again this next year.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, first of all, I do want to echo what Jim says about North Star. I think that that was an absolute no-brainer, and Jim really should be complimented with coming up with really a brilliant idea of taking and pumping more ridership in without pumping more expense in. Right now, the subsidy for a ride is $22 each way on the train. If you can spread that over more people, that subsidy is going to drop. So I think it's something that I really feel that it's important we look at. As I understand the proposal, there would be very little, if any, increase in cost, possibly something to do with the leases of the track, maybe it'd be the only place. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that's probably the only place where there's going to be an increase. You don't need to bring any more hardware in, you don't need more employees, you just take the existing ones and apply them more efficiently. So with that said, one of the things that in fact, this morning we had a very excellent meeting with the home care providers and early childhood education. But one of the things that came out of that was that home health care and keeping people in their homes, providing not only disability, but anybody as they age, they are going to want to stay in their home if they can, and to provide mechanisms that will support providers of home health care a more efficient way to get money to be able to stay in that, to increase the wages to those home health care providers. They're now some of the lowest paid health care providers in the industry, and to try and help either through the reimbursement program or through other directed programs to try and get those wages up and bring those healthcare providers in so that they are in a position to deal with not only people who are just wanting to stay in their home, but people who do have disabilities. And to expand that to allow people, as I think Jim said and was said here, the idea is if you can keep people in their home, it's much less expensive in terms of the burden on society. And they're happier. They're happier to be in their homes. Now there reaches a certain point where they have to face the fact that there's going to have to be some changes made. But again, intermediate facilities, healthy living facilities, assisted living, and not just in the traditional sense, but communities that can bring people together who are reaching a certain stage in life, that while they don't need to have daily care, if they have easy access to meals and to laundry or other things that they would normally do in their home, they are going to be able to stay independent longer, and they will also have that like community to be able to have as a social background. So I think those are things that I would certainly look towards trying to support and promote as a way of helping not only the disabled community, but the community that's aging as well. So that's kind of just my thinking on that.
Thank you. So our final question we're going to ask, I know we're getting close to that 7:30 time where we wanted to do closing remarks, so maybe in just a couple minutes you could answer this question. To allow our audience to better get to know you, besides disability services, can you please share a few of your other priorities if elected to the Minnesota Senate or Minnesota House? And Mr. Relph, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, I think I've touched on part of it, and that is education. Not only in the specific sense of just schools, but of general education in terms of jobs. These issues are so intertwined that if we have an educated workforce, we can fill jobs that businesses have needs to fill. It's almost chicken and eggy, sort of. If you want businesses to come here, you have to provide them with workers, but if you want workers, you have to provide them with jobs. So I think that there's a two-pronged approach here, and one of those is on the education side, and I've already touched on this. Technical education, get kids out of the high school, the K through 12, so that they can, one of the things I would like to see as a standard, that a high school graduate, in order to graduate, pass a proficiency exam that would allow them to be admitted to any MINSCU school. That's kind of a standard that's probably pretty easy to establish and gives the school boards something that they can work with without mandating that they get in programs. Let the school boards, local school boards, decide how to approach this, but this is the aspiration. Then provide, as I said before, these community partnerships where students at an early opportunity are exposed to various vocations. The Spark program, I think, is something that I'm very interested in and that I see happening, where people are being exposed to various job skills. The St. Cloud Times, I think, is doing a wonderful job with that. So again, it's the idea of promoting education in a specified way that directs and focuses students and people into careers that we need to have filled. That then relates back to the education in the healthcare area. Again, we incentivize this and expose students to that and give them tools to learn that. I'm kind of repeating myself, but I think that's part of my passion, is because I think this is important, because we need to grow our economy. And part of what we need to do is make it a good business-friendly economy. Part of that's providing workers, part of that is providing a regulatory environment that invites business, not stifles it. Add that to tax reform, to try and help small businesses, which I was an owner of. Try to do that to give us a business-friendly environment, provide workers. I think it's a win-win.
Thanks. Representative Knoblach.
Well, in my position as chair of the Ways and Means Committee, some of my work is sort of cut out for me, and you know, I have different bills I want to work on, but I sort of have this overall responsibility of A, making sure the state's budget actually balances, and B, trying to allocate the resources that we have among the different needs that are out there. And so, you know, we have a lot of hearings and we spend a lot of time trying to see what the needs are, see how they can be most efficiently met, try to decide, you know, where the money really should go. But beyond that, you know, there are a lot of different bills I could talk about that I've introduced. I was really pleased this last year that the one big finance bill that got done at the legislature was the supplemental budget bill that I was the author of. And so I really feel like I am someone who works successfully with people on both sides of the aisle and has a record of doing that. But, you know, to pick out a couple of other subjects without taking a lot of time, education, I think, is obviously very important. I think public safety is important. If people can't feel safe, a lot of the money we put into some of these other things aren't necessarily useful. I mean, if you need to be worried that you're going to be mugged or something if you're taking the transit system, which fortunately hasn't really been a problem, but if that is a problem, well, people aren't going to ride the transit system, and then the money you put into it is not going to be useful. And so you need to have public safety for people. I think that's one of the basic jobs of government. And beyond that, I finally talk about creating good jobs. And my background in the private sector is wide-ranging. I mean, I've owned a business of one kind or another for 30 years. Real estate is the business I've probably been in most consistently, but I worked in the medical device business industry for a number of years. I worked and owned a company here in town that did printing and direct marketing, data processing type work. I've worked in the communications industry as well. I guess I feel like I have a good sense for what it takes to create jobs, and I've also been privileged to, frankly, bring a lot of money back home to St. Cloud, and particularly our education institutions, to build new buildings, remodel new buildings, give opportunities there, and give people good jobs in the process of building those buildings. And so, but you know, creating good jobs and maintaining good jobs is also a really vitally important area to me.
Thank you. So I know we're getting close to the end of time, and our other two candidates were able to dive into some audience questions. And so if you did have one of those questions and would like to maybe approach our other candidates afterwards and ask them one-on-one, I think that would be great. Or if you have follow-up for other candidates on their responses, please do that as well. So I'm going to allow you two to just give a quick closing statement, but I'm going to ask you the same question with your closing statements that I asked Zach and Eric, and all of these folks are strong advocates come the legislative session. And so what we want to know is, what is the most effective way to communicate with legislators? What is your preferred way? Is it email, phone call, in person? And then you can also give your closing statements.
Well, I would just say, first of all, I mean, I'm always happy to communicate with people in whatever form they want to communicate. And I mean, I have met with many, many people down at the Capitol, and I'm, you know, always happy to do that if you want to come down there. I mean, I've met with people up here too. My home phone number is on the front of thousands, probably tens of thousands of brochures floating around this community, so people have that if they want to call me at home. But I would tell you that probably what I find is the most efficient way is email. And so I'd invite people to use my legislative email, which is rep.jim.knoblach@house.mn. And it's just, you know, if you're trying to reach someone by phone, you're playing phone tag back and forth, not everyone can make it down to the Capitol. I just find that the email is the most efficient and, probably guarantees you a, quicker way of reaching me than if we're trying to play phone tag. So I, encourage people to get a hold of me, and I appreciate you coming tonight and holding this forum. And I will be around afterwards for questions. Thank you.
Well, I don't have a Senate email yet. Hopefully I will in the future, and I agree with Jim. That's probably the most efficient way to get in touch. I will certainly make every effort to respond to emails. Just a little bit more of my background. As an attorney for 30 years, we're talking about how we bring things together and how we accomplish things. I spent 30 years trying to get people to agree who didn't even want to be in the same room together. And as a business and commercial attorney, that was a tremendous effort that I needed to put into. I needed to be able to communicate not only with my clients, but with the people that were on the other side and with their counsel. And so I find that those skills, I believe, will be something that will serve me well as a legislator in the ability to listen and synthesize, take all good ideas. Nobody has a monopoly on ideas. And so we need to be able to listen to everyone's ideas, stripped from partisanship, and determine which ideas are good and which ideas aren't, and then seek ways to reach principle that our policy that does not violate principle. And I think there's a lot of room between principle and policy where things can get done. And so my major focus is, as a legislator, is you only get one senator for the district. So I have to take everybody's ideas. And some of them I may not agree wholly with, but they may be valid, or they may need something, may need an airing. So we carry them to their logical conclusion, find out unintended consequences, and actually then come with a synthesis that brings us and moves us forward. And that's kind of what I would like to be able to do. So I also echo Jim, thank you for having us here. Again, we apologize for the kind of the shuffle between, I feel like I should be cloning myself in this race, but there is only one of me, so that's the way it's worked out. But thank you again.
Well, thank you for all of our candidates for kind of bearing with us on this different candidate format, I would call it. Thank you to our audience for being here tonight. I want to apologize. I thought the fireplace was really lovely at first, and now I'm starting to feel the heat. But thank you all. I hope you have a few minutes to stick around. I do want to let folks know, come January, the MNCCD is at the Capitol every Tuesday and is there to provide support and assistance for people wanting to reach out to their legislators. So please take advantage of that. And then Armin Moore will be at the Capitol on Tuesday, March 14th, 2017, for our day at the Capitol. So please start planning for that. So thank you all, and